I am so glad we've got Dr. R and Dr. R. They're coming from two different trajectories. I could say two different sides of the earth, but they are really, really very close together. They already know of each other. Um, it- Dr. Rose said, "Oh, he's a great guy." When I said, wouldn't it be great if Dr. Rodney could come in? And I'm very grateful that we're having this opportunity to record because I get to peek in on what you're doing on LinkedIn. I have enough time in my day, but in this a little less than an hour, um, my audience, which will be going on into the future, will go, okay, now I really have a view of the passion of these people and also their expertise. But I mean, you both have stepped out of comfort zones many times, and it's for the sake of others, many others. And you're both very instructive, and you make sure the word and communication goes out. And I was just telling you before we started that I was asked a lot of questions. The badge that I wore when someone would hire me into a home where I could be of assistance to one of the loved ones, when I was wearing this badge, a family member, a friend, a spouse, a neighbor, even maybe a medical person might turn and ask me about something. And I would think, I don't know. I don't know if there's a solution for that. I don't know if we've used one of those. I don't know if the family has support, if they've been able to find organizations, if they, how what do you do financially when you get to this point? How do you make decisions? What should I buy? What's going to make them safer in the bathroom? All these questions. And all I had to draw from was the other homes where I was serving during those years. And so now I've reached a lot farther. And I'm finding out that there are a lot of gaps there's a lot of very definable gaps in the information that people are looking for, or even what questions to ask when they themselves are challenged by age related, care related, longevity issues, or someone they really care about. They just like, what is the best? What can I offer? Doesn't anybody know? Doesn't anyone have? Is there a policy about this? Is the government doing something? There were so many questions, and I'm looking for those answers. And so the two of you said yes. Thank you, Dr. Rose, and thank you, Dr. Rodney. Welcome. Which one of you would like to start off?
You can go, Rose. You're closer.
I was actually I mean, in addition to the fact that our initials are both DRJ.
Yes.
I actually used to live in New Zealand, so I'm very close to Rodney, even proximity wise. I moved to Canada in 2007, but my parents still live in Auckland, New Zealand. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's good to meet Rodney, of course, in person, as in person as this can be. Thank you so much for the great introduction. I do admire Rodney quite a bit. I read his posts. He's very passionate, and I absolutely respect that. So it's an honor for me to be kind of on par, I guess, or even in the same space as he is. And so I'm very happy to answer any inquiries and questions that you might have, Christine, about what I do and how I do things.
I may as well go backwards. I do that a lot. I'm kind of the queen of the half finished sentences. So that's why I have to have guests. I have to have guests because maybe they will finish my sentences or actually have full paragraphs. They can say, I'm going to start backwards. Recently, I saw that you posted photographs that were taken of you, and you're obviously responding to the group that you're talking with. And it was people sitting in chairs. The background made me think that it maybe was a larger building of some sort. What was going on? Why did you show up? How much did they pay you? No, I'm kidding.
It was free.
Of course it was. I figured you showed up out of the goodness of your heart
I
and
did.
because you had something worth hearing. What was that about?
So I have been very grateful to have various organizations reach out to me that work with ethnically diverse older adults. And my message is that I am happy and ready to provide pro bono education to them or for them about elder abuse and about how to protect themselves and legal and financial rights that they have. And I do that because it is such an important part of healthy aging. And it's needed, and it's not necessarily provided by organizations. And so that's what I do. They call me on weekends, on long weekends. I'm working Saturday, Sunday. And last weekend, it was a long weekend, so Monday was the day off, but I was working like that and events and being able to have a conversation with various older adults who come from all parts of the world and who are struggling, I guess, to live the best life they can in Canada because of various barriers, which include language and culture. So you'll find me at these events giving out all the information that I can give and answering any questions that they might have in ways that are culturally competent, but also in ways that are very, I don't want to say basic, but in layman terms, because I think sometimes we forget that some older adults might, especially if they're linguistically diverse, they might need us to break down information a little more to make it clear to them that the information we're sharing is information that they actually can process, right? And so I take away all the jargon and all the fancy terminologies and words from some government and not-for-profit documents, and I just really give it to them the way that I've learned is the best method. So that's the picture.
Would you say that you know what, Dr. Rodney, that made a huge difference. Just muting. I think our voices keep echoing in your room and coming back. Bunch of, women when we're talking, it just it bounces around. But I promise that you're going to unmute and do your own talking, and I'll just like that. Go right ahead. You are unmuted.
Look, Rose, I think that's a really important point that you've made, and it's something that we certainly teach and aspire to here as well. Is not necessarily looking at people from their individual cultural background, but looking at people from the perspective of you are a human being and you have individual needs, regardless of what they are, and we're going to address those. And I think that's where a lot of particularly aged care services fall down. We get so preoccupied with cultural policies and frameworks, and you must do this and you must do that. And I often tell the story of a meeting that I had with a Greek Orthodox priest who happened to be the CEO of one of our large aged care organisations here. And he asked me about cultural awareness and how I managed that. And I said to him, it's all irrelevant. And he nearly fell off his chair. And he said, but how can you possibly say that? You're in a Greek organisation. And I said, because if I look at you as a human being, it doesn't matter what your cultural background is, what language you speak, what your sexual or gender identity is. It doesn't matter. I start off with a very clean slate of you are a human being and what are your individual needs. And we often get very sidelined by, oh, you're Italian, so you must have these preconceived ideas and needs that clearly don't apply.
I saw a post from you, Rodney, and I'm not quoting it exactly right, but it was something like, 5-star failure or something, look at this system. It's just not working. Tell me more about that, and then I'll decide if you have a counterpart right here in the US, and you may already know him, but go ahead and tell me more about, is that whistleblowing?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I wear a number of hats over here in Australia. I am the managing director of a community organisation, which is Community Home Australia, and we were set up as the first non-institutional specialist service for people living with younger onset dementia in the community. So we run a number of what we call supported independent living homes here and a day centre. Which have been very successful, and we're now moving into we're just about to complete the purchase of a resort in Indonesia, which will provide supported holiday opportunities for people living with dementia or with other forms of disability. So that's a big leap for us that we're about to embark on. But it all comes back to the same point, that we're looking at identifying a need and then working out what the solution to that need is, not the other way around. We're not trying to develop a service and then go, okay, well, now we've got to find people to use it. All of the things that we do are based on what people are telling us is the need, and then we're developing things from there. And unfortunately, Australia has a very institutional medical model for aged care. It's almost exclusively institutional. So we have a very limited home care portfolio, basically, that offers some support in the community. But as soon as you require significant levels of personal care or clinical care support, your only option here in Australia is to go into a nursing home. And so a lot of our work is around developing options so that people don't have to do that, regardless of whether they're under 65 or over 65. But with that institutional model, we are incredibly regulated in this country. We've had a specific Aged Care Act since 1997. But what we're finding, and what a lot of my whistleblowing work is about, is highlighting that system actually doesn't work. And so we've recently had a new star rating system, which is supposed to be a transparent system for consumers to be able to compare like for like in services and determine which ones are good and which ones are bad. And unfortunately, that system hasn't worked. And that's a lot of that work that I've been posting on LinkedIn is around highlighting the issues that people actually can't use that system to make a meaningful decision.
So if someone said to me, you need to base your life, the rest of your life, on decisions that were made 25 years ago. And don't look at anything that was, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, last year, post shutdowns. Don't look at any of those. So you are daring to say, look, this isn't going to look what the harm that is being done here, the mentality, the this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way it will always be done. There was an article about a person, 18 years old, quadriplegic. I only know the headline. I did not read in depth, but the fight is being required to be moved into a nursing home, 18 years old. Not there isn't an 18-year-old who's going, oh, I got to take that back, because there are people who have actually spent time as a young person in a nursing home to develop empathy, or as a report or something like that. They've spent time in there, but you're telling me that is where I have to go. And so I appreciate this. Okay, so the person that I'm thinking of is Steve Moran with Senior, now I've got to say it right, Senior Living Foresight. I believe he is a whistleblower too. Are you familiar with him?
I'm not.
Okay, you are now. So Steve Moran, and he has been on, he came on really early onto my show. He must have just had a warm spot in his heart for someone who was just starting out. And so it's easy to champion him and the things that he does and the people that he brings in. But, you were talking about Indonesia. I don't know how far along you are on this, but Kathy Schoaf, Schoaf, SHOAF. Okay.
I know that, yes.
I got one right.
It's that one I know.
Wonderful. Good. I'm glad you two are going to be able to compare notes, and because you really want things to be done right for those individuals you were talking about. So tell us something else, maybe about MAICD or whatever it is that maybe is just right in the back of your mind. It's like, I want to make sure. And then I'll have you mute again while Dr. Rose talks more in depth about how she came to this point. I know how I got passionate about empowering people to not be victims of elder abuse. But mine is a very short story. I think hers is probably more fascinating than mine. So, Dr. Rodney,
sure.
MAICD?
That's just, I'm a member of the Company Directors Association. That's all that is. I think that the other thing that may be of more interest is my link with the University of Canberra. So I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Canberra. And so what we've also been able to do is, while we're pioneering a lot of this alternative non-institutional frameworks and services, we're able to back that up with research. So we've got some very clear links with the university. We've run a number of research projects. We have students coming in, because that was another big problem for us in Australia, is that all of our university students who are studying nursing or allied health disciplines, they do all of their clinical experience in nursing homes for their aged care component. So they only see what is happening and what has been happening for the last 30 years. They don't get to see anything new. And so what we wanted to do was provide them with opportunities to say, aging and aged care doesn't have to be this institutional model. Have a look at this and bring some of those thoughts with you as you enter into your profession to try and move away from this institutional care. So that's an exciting part of my job, because it gets us gathering the evidence that we need and informing the future generations of people who are going to be working in aged care.
I'm excited about that. I mean, you're talking about people who are just starting out, who are going to affect policies, could even become instrumental, could be the person who's brought in and asked, so what do you see? You're an expert in this area. And they'll be so glad that they were in your university, and go, yes, I got to see more facets of aging life. I got to see alternatives to a 25, 30-year-old program. And
Yeah.
and plus I've got these experiences now, plus I've got, maybe a couple of PhDs or whatever to back me up. So I'm really excited about that. Oh, thank you. Thank you for making things happen.
Pleasure.
Dr. Rose, what do you have bubbling up in you? and Dr. Rodney, I will also mute myself. What do you have bubbling up in you? Figure you've got the stage for a little while here. We'll just make faces at you once in a while and nod in agreement.
Well, it's great to hear what Rodney is doing, because here in Calgary, I've actually been teaching a course called The Psychology of Aging for the past 16 years. And I've managed to have thousands of students go through this course, and most of them are majoring in psychology, social work, nursing, even are coming from child studies and law and business. I think they've just got this, the younger adults have this interest in aging. I always joke with them on day one that I'm hoping to brainwash them to work within the field. And I kind of secretly mean that. But for me, my goal in this course is to provide younger adults with an opportunity to have a safe space to talk about stereotypes and the fear of aging and why we are an age-fearing society. And we talk about death and dying quite a bit as well. And what does healthy, successful aging look like to them? And what I also do, I bring in various guest speakers who are working in various industries and places where, for me, it's important that students understand that if you are going to work with older adults and for them, then it can be anything that really is an environment that interacts with them and to benefit them. So my guest speakers come in from the homeless shelters and from palliative care and hospices and not-for-profits that teach older adults how to use technology. And I recently also partnered with a older adult community that has independent and assisted living older adults and invited them into the classroom. And they were our lifelong learner guests that came into the class, and they sat with the students, and the students had the opportunity to have a conversation with older adults, sometimes in ways that might not be provided to them in their regular lives, because some of my students actually don't have grandparents or don't have good relationships with their grandparents. And that's mostly where some of their stereotypes and thoughts about aging and older adults come from that lack of or negative interaction. And so bringing in some older adults from these older adult communities is beneficial, of course, in kind of an intergenerational way, where students get to talk with an older person, and an older person gets to have conversations with a different generation or a different age category. And some of them also aren't grandparents, so will never be grandparents, right? And so it's such a great way of, like you were saying, Rodney, of exposing students or younger people to a different world that shouldn't be different in a lot of ways, really. But it seems to be the case, unfortunately, right now. And I think it only helps benefit and enhances perceptions and hopefully relationships, and gets rid of some of those stereotypes. So those were the thoughts that were bubbling in my head, Christine, as Rodney was talking and mentioning what he was doing as an educator.
I didn't understand my own culture until I landed in a European country one summer. I had been to Mexico, kind of a short time. It wasn't all touristy. Canada just feels like home, but with, some wonderful differences than my region in the state of Oregon on the West Coast. But I didn't realize that really minor things, just the way that you start a conversation, the way you continue it, and the way you end it, is a signal to someone who has had a different life. So a person who has lived unhoused for a long time is accustomed to a way of relating to people. A person who is facing the end of their life, they may be wanting to talk about the last time that they will ever, they may want to talk that way, let alone someone whose first language is really all they're able to use as a tool, because the second language is just getting more difficult, maybe due to some cognitive changes. I know that Isabel Tom has talked about trying different places with her aging family members, and she isn't the only one that experienced how there was a sadness that couldn't be understood by the most friendly of CNAs, because it just didn't smell like the food they had eaten. It didn't have that comfort. I'm just thinking that as I continue to age, there will be some comforts that I will have to realize that I'm not just clinging to, but they really, I don't know, are directing how I think about today. Was today a good day? It's like, no, it felt empty. Something culturally was missing, or someone responded in a way that reminds me of the past. That also makes me think of the folks that are working on helping caregiving people, to especially those that are hired, or the person is in a community, to understand trauma impacted people that have gone through something terrible, and how those triggers can make you feel like this person's just not cooperative, or they're impossible to please, or we don't know how to reach to them. There's just so many different things that follows a person into their aging. And both of you are unpacking that, saying, look at each individual as an individual. They aren't going to all feel the same way about mustaches. They're not all going to feel the same way about loud music, just because they look like, or have a background, or a life experience that matches the other ones that you are around. I am so grateful that each of you are working on that in your way. I would learn so much from each of you if I would let you both talk some more. So, Rodney, your turn.
I think just picking up on what you've said, it's a really important message for people, because what you've described is how your life experiences have made you as an individual. And one of my favourite talks that I give, I delivered the Sarah Cope oration last year at the university, and that entire presentation was a look back at my career in aging and the people and that I experienced through that and their stories. And what really struck the audience and what continues to interest people is when I look back at my career, you know, it's 30 years. It's not that long a period of time, really. But when I look at the people that I have either provided care for or assisted along their journey over that time, the number of both positive and negative world events that they have experienced is absolutely phenomenal. And what it has allowed me to do as a practitioner, as a registered nurse, is to experience events that happened well before me, but it's given me an empathy and an understanding of why people do what they do. And I think when you start from that very simple premise again of you are a human being, what have you experienced? How has that made you the person that is standing in front of me today? That allows you to understand and almost preempt a lot of the issues that we normally would see in an aged care setting. So we're very, very, very passionate about moving away from the negative connotation of behaviour, and looking at the way that someone expresses themselves, which clinically we would call a behaviour, is simply just a response to either what I have done to them or what their life experience has done to them and how they are now perceiving their environment that they're in now. And I think when you move away from that, and my colleague Nicole Smith has been instrumental in drumming that into me. Whenever anything happens in any of our services, Nicole's first question is always, what did we do? And that level of introspection is something that is rarely done, because people are just not open to thinking about, oh, did I cause that? But when you do that, it gives you such a level of understanding that you then move beyond all of those negative connotations, and you start being able to build an environment where those things just don't happen. And that's been one of the truly wonderful things that we've been able to achieve is, you know, we don't reach for antipsychotic medications. We don't reach for locking people into environments and secure units. It's the complete opposite. It's opening everything up, looking at the root cause of that behavior, that response, and managing it at its foundational core. And we just have some amazing results over the last 3 years of people that we've brought into our services that have both been physically and chemically restrained in some way, and wiping that out completely. And that's just enormous. It's a groundbreaking approach that I know others are doing around the world, but for Australia, it's just not on their radar. And that's really where we're pushing, is to get that understanding out there that locking people up in a secure dementia unit is not the answer. Giving people antipsychotic medication to dull them is not the answer. You have to find the root cause and address the root cause, because that is beneficial for everyone, both the person that's living with dementia or cognitive impairment and the people that are caring for them.
I was thinking about how emotional it would be to put together that presentation, and looking back and looking to the side, looking to the future, and then you bring out these other things. You're not just looking for something to complain about. You're actually making something much more human for people who maybe have always adhered to the status quo, but are now the ones that are approaching that point. And Rose was talking about that fear of aging. It's like, I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want them to put me away and do
Yeah.
those things. Oh my goodness.
Yep.
Well, I'm going to peek at the time. We're good for the time being, as long as I mute myself. And Rodney, I'm going to have you mute again with me. And maybe Dr. Rose, if there's more that you'd like to share about what I call your path to this point. I don't know if you were 5 years old and came out like a ballerina and said, I know what I'm going to do in the future. I know I'm being sarcastic right now, but some people have literally said, yeah, I met so and so. We were at the grocery store. We did these things, and it's like, that's what I want to do. I want to be with those people and make sure that life is good. So I honestly don't know the answer that you're about to give. So I look forward to listening, though.
Well, maybe it did start with me being born, because that interest and that passion, I think, was always there in terms of understanding that my parents were immigrants, and they are immigrants. I'm from the Middle East, and so I always say I'm a lifelong immigrant, because we hopped from one country to another since I was born, until we landed in New Zealand in the 1990s. And I think as I was at university, I realized that I had a growing interest in people who were from my ethnic community and how they were dealing with immigration and the stresses. And our parents were highly qualified, but they couldn't find jobs. And so my dad, who had a PhD from the UK, was driving a taxi in New Zealand and delivering fast food back before Uber was even around. And that broke me, really, because I could see as a 18-year-old that my dad was struggling accepting that in his 50s with a PhD from the UK, that was his journey. But he was still doing it because he felt very strongly about providing for his family. And that made me wonder a lot. It made me wonder, how are people feeling, when they come to a new country and they speak a different language, they have different values, they have a different way of thinking about the world, but they still want to be part of this world, and they still want to be respected and honored and valued and to provide value. How does experiencing all these things, how does that impact the way they think about being immigrants and being part of the society where it seems that they're being rejected at the same time? And so when I was doing my master's and I was doing my PhD, when I was majoring in psychology, I really worked with the government in New Zealand and not-for-profit mental health agencies and refugee organizations on and around this topic of refugees and ethnic communities, and how we can provide them with supports that aren't necessarily hugely different than the one we provide mainstream individuals, but in a way compatible with their values and their religious or their spiritual and cultural needs, to make them feel like we still are providing them with something that makes sense to them. So just as Rodney was saying, we are looking at people as humans, but with the understanding and the respect that comes with tweaking some things that could better work for them because of linguistic barriers that could be problematic. You know, sometimes you go into an organization and it's take it or leave it. We have the service. It could help you. It's worked for other people, but this is the only service that we have. So you take it or leave it. And I think that's really unfair. I think we really do have to sometimes consider whether or not the services that we have do meet the needs of the individuals. And so, yeah, I think being, having parents who are immigrants really kind of got me thinking about how are my parents going to age in New Zealand? They are very good at conversing in English, but they don't want to sometimes. I speak fluent Arabic with them, and sometimes I do, even though I'm here, when I do visit, I do go with them to their doctor's appointments, and I'm always there to make sure that no one's taking advantage of them, and and that the information you're giving them as a professional is information that they are able to understand, and it makes sense to them. And that's why I do what I do about, talking to people about elder abuse, because I realize there is a need for us to go, yeah, this has always been the way that we've been doing things, but it's not working for everybody. And so it's okay for us to change and alter things to make it work for this group of people. It's not beneath us to do it. And it's important for us to kind of sometimes do a little bit of extra work, right? If you're really passionate about something, I think, yeah, you have to work extra hard sometimes on it, or you have to do the work on the weekend. Because I always think about what goodness that is bringing to people at the end of the day. And it feels good to do good. And so my interest really came because I am a child of immigrants, and I want all immigrant people who speak different languages than mainstream society, to be able to feel like they're supported and that they could live their best lives, whether it's in community settings or in hospices, or if they're in palliative care, if they go into, a memory care, dementia care kind of environment. My grandmother, who was Kurdish, had been diagnosed with dementia, and she reverted back to speaking in Kurdish, and there was no professionals who could help her in that language. And so it was hugely frustrating for her. And it makes me sad to think that that was how she ended, her last few months or years of her journey, that she couldn't communicate with people, and they didn't bother to provide any support for her to meet those cultural needs, right? And so it's a very personal topic, and it's a very personal passion for me.
I think your insights into ethnicity, Rose, are fascinating, because while I too am the child of immigrants, I was born here in Australia and lived a very Caucasian Australian upbringing. But then as my career has progressed, I ran a Hungarian specific home for 4 years. I was the foundational CEO of the first Islamic home in New South Wales. So I've kind of gone back to my ethnic roots, if that's possible, and supported people that clearly have additional struggles to be successful in mainstream care. So I think a really interesting point that I think that you'll enjoy is one of the things that we've been looking at recently is at our workforce, because we too in Australia have an immensely diverse workforce culturally. I think the majority of aged care staff in Australia actually come from Nepal. So you've got this tiny little country, a very, very long way away from us, who speaks a different language with a different culture and different religion, comes to Australia, and then they, despite all of their qualifications, they do an unskilled job in aged care. And what we've been doing recently, and what Nicole has been doing, is interviewing them and asking them how they have perceived their journey in Australian aged care. And the thing that's come out the strongest is that it's nothing like what they would do for their elders in their country. And it's not acceptable to them personally, but they do it because they have to fit in. And there's this overwhelming pressure on them to not be different, to conform to Australian norms, even though they're absolutely appalled at the level of care and the lack of intimacy and relationship in Australian aged care. They do it because they feel that they have no choice otherwise. So it's not only impacting the people from other cultures who are receiving care services, it's actually affecting the people that are providing care services as well. So, it's just fascinating how ethnicity and culture and language all fit in to someone's experience of receiving and delivering care to someone else. The boss is muted.
The sign comes down. It's like, girl, nobody can hear you. Rodney, while you are on this roll, I'm so grateful that you both are personally pushing rocks up hills just to get something going for, it's going to impact more than one individual, but still you're pushing with all your might to make those things happen. And you have been both successful. So I'm going to take this moment to say, Dr. Rodney, how would you like for people to be able to contact you or get a hold of you or see materials or jump on the bandwagon or, YouTube or something? How would you like to be remembered?
Yep. So certainly for those that are on LinkedIn, reach out, please. I'd love to chat. We're always looking at sharing our experiences in Australia with anyone around the world. I recently joined the International Federation on Aging, and I sit on their board now. So that I will be attending their conferences. Their next conference next year is in Cape Town in South Africa. So there's another opportunity to meet and have a cup of coffee. But yeah, just reach out. You can reach out through the website, through Community Home Australia. We tried to come to Canada and present at the conference that's coming up next month, but they weren't interested. So unfortunately, we won't be coming. We're going to New York instead. But it is, we're open to building partnerships and relationships with people all around the world. We've recently had people come from the US. Teepa Snow is here currently in Australia, and we've got some of our team doing some work with her. We've had Michael Verde here from Texas. He delivered some workshops and a presentation at the university for us. And so we're always looking at forming partnerships, and we're happy to come over to you, Rose, and present at your university and start up a conversation, because when it comes down to it, the three countries are very, very similar in where we're at. We're all looking at how can we do this better and how can we do this differently, but stuck in this minutia of, but this is the way it's funded and this is the way it's regulated and this is the way it's been. So I think along with people like Alan Power, that we converse with regularly, you know, trying to get that message out there that it is possible, you can do it, and we all need to come at this from our own particular perspective to move things along, and I think eventually we'll get there.
I'm so glad that you have support at the university, that people are opening their eyes wider, and that you're able to express things in a way they're like, that is a problem, or that isn't the only solution. Thank you so much. Dr. Rose, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then when you've said things that are up and coming, that are happening right now, something you want to make sure that people remember so that they can follow what you're doing or support what you're doing, learn from you. And then we'll just say goodbye to each other, and I'll be so grateful. Someone around here is hungry for dinner or lunch or something.
Thank you. Well, I'm waiting for Rodney to invite me to Australia. So let's also exchange that kind of thought right there.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
I'm on LinkedIn quite often. I do work right now as a research lead for a not-for-profit called Caria, but yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best place to find me, and just connect or follow. I'm more than happy to have that. But you're absolutely right. I think we're all trying countrywise to do our best and to learn from each other, and I think that's very important. And to have these open conversations about what's working and what's not working, because I struggle sometimes with convincing people that working in silos actually doesn't work. And I've come across this quite a bit, especially in the not-for-profit world, that sharing information. But that's the educator in me that always goes, well, what's the point of doing this research if we're not sharing it with people and learning from each other and experimenting and seeing what's working? Maybe it works here in Canada, but could it also work in the States or in Australia or anywhere else? Yeah, I don't know which conference rejected you, Rodney, and I apologize on behalf of the entire country for that. But don't feel bad, because I also got rejected, I think, from a conference in the country as well, and I'm not going to but I did too. However, with that being said, actually next week I am presenting at a local conference on the topic of elder abuse. And it's a conference that brings in a lot of immigrant serving agencies. And the topic is of interest to them about diversity and health and well-being of older adults and protecting their rights. And in fact, in July, I'm going to London in the UK to also present at a conference over there. And so it's good to know that your work is being recognized internationally as well as locally as well. I think it makes you feel good about what you're doing, and that you need to enhance, I guess, those connections as well. So it's a bummer sometimes when you get rejected, but then for every door that closes, I'm sure there's going to be doors that are going to open up, and appreciate and value what you have to offer. And so off I go next week to a conference here in Calgary, and in July, I'm packing up and going to the UK for a couple of weeks.
Fantastic. Very good. Very good. We're actually holding a conference in Bali in August, so we might talk to you about that.
There we go. I don't know how long the flight is from New Zealand over to your neck of the woods, but
well, it's 15 hours from Vancouver to Auckland direct, so one flight, and I'm kind of used to that. So
okay. Well, we're going to finish up. I'm going to say that I have 2 books that I've written, and because an expert said, I'm so glad you gave me this one, because she said, I let 2 people thumb through it, and both of them said it was really helping them to think, now that's something I can do for myself as I'm going through grief. And it's such a quick read. And that's what she said really made the difference. And it's Caregiver Kit. So that's why you have to look at the letters, because sometimes it's like, no, you mean caregiver. It's like, no, I really meant caregiver. Blame the author on that title. And this is the thing that everybody says, but it's hard to do it ahead of time. And that is to make yourself aware and make the people around you aware of, if I had that aspect of aging, if that happens to me, these are the things that are important to me. And this isn't important at all. So don't worry about it. And then they go, phew, now I understand you better. This is the kind of person that you are. And you yourself, as you're going through the journal, can go, I never really thought about that before, but I have a very definite opinion, and I want to make sure that those around me get some traction on what's going to be really helpful for me, one individual human, rather than, everybody else's parents wanted this, so maybe we'll do that for them. It's just, it's helping people not to have to try to read your mind. How do you want this handled now that I hit age-related health? I am so grateful. A kind and smart man told me yesterday, do your market research. Find out what the people right here within walking distance of where you live, find out what they want as far as resources for their own aging or their own caregiving or their own cognitive health. And then once you hook them in, then you can give them what they're going to need a couple of years from now. I said, thank you very much. And he said what I've heard all along. People don't want to talk about aging, getting old, the things that can happen. So I'm so glad that I found one person in Canada and one person in Australia today who do want to talk about it and who are offering solutions and are able to define those things, those specters that we're afraid of in our upcoming aging. Thank you so much, Rose, Rodney, DRJ, and DRJ. I'm glad that you were willing to come to my little show and bring all those big things that make a big difference in individuals' lives. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.